Hello parents, welcome to the Holy Rosary highlights of this week. Here you see some photos of the students having fun in a music class activity. Enjoy also the rest of the photos from this week. We have two virtue talks for you, both by Father Flores. The first one is the virtue of circumspection. That was the virtue of the week this week. And also there's a recording of a virtue talk from the beginning of the school year that I never uploaded and sent out, and that's the virtue of generosity. So stay tuned for both of those virtue talks. Tonight is the last Stations of the Cross and Penance service. Be sure to come if you can. Next week, of course, we'll have Holy Week, and the more services, the more liturgies you can attend as a family, the better. The virtue of the week next week will be docility. Please be sure to go over the daily paragraphs and prayers as a family at home. Thank you very much. Have a wonderful weekend, and God bless.
Today, boys and girls, we're going to talk about the virtue of what? Who knows what the virtue is? Yes, what is the virtue? Circumspection. Very good. Circumspection. And we learned that circumspection is a daughter virtue to the virtue of prudence. Right? So we've been doing justice for a long time. Justice, what we owe God. You know, sometimes we think we owe God. Yes, you owe everything to God. And sometimes we don't think about it in those terms, but everything we do, everything we have, comes from God, and so we owe God a lot. And not only do we owe God, we also owe one another. We owe one another respect and dignity and courtesy, all those other virtues. We owe them to one another because all of us are children of God, and so we are owed those things. Prudence is a little bit different, right? Prudence is the big virtue. And prudence helps us to know the truth and to see clearly in any situation. Did you listen to that? Did you hear that? How wonderful that is? Prudence is the virtue that helps us to know the truth and to see clearly in any situation. Boy, I don't know about some of the adults here, but I wish I was always aware of that virtue of prudence, because sometimes you think, oh my gosh, I have no idea where I'm going, or what I'm doing, or what choice I need to make. But that's where God comes in and he helps us with the virtue of prudence. And today, the virtue of circumspection. The virtue of circumspection, listen, I know you all know the definition of it, but let's reflect on it for a second. It's careful consideration of circumstances and consequences. Right? So circumspection is careful consideration of circumstances and consequences. Does anybody know what circumstances are? Circumstances, everything that surrounds us. Right? The decisions we have to make, the places we go, the places we don't go, the things that we say, the things we don't say, the things that are said to us, the things that are not said to us. Circumstances, all of that. That's what circumstances is. Really everything that surrounds our life. Consequence. Well, everybody knows what a consequence is, right? A consequence is a result of something. So let's say I punch Gio in the arm. The consequence is that Gio's going to get a big old bruise, and he's not going to feel his arm for a week. I'm that strong, Gio. I'm that strong that that's what would happen to you. No, that would be a consequence, right? An action has a consequence. And so the virtue of prudence helps us to carefully consider all of the circumstances of our lives and the consequences, so that we can make good decisions, so that we can walk in the truth. And remember, I told you at Mass that the truth is Jesus. And knowing that Jesus is always going to be there for us, that Jesus is always going to take care of us. Because sometimes, boys and girls, if we don't believe that Jesus takes care of us, we act in an unvirtuous way. We can act in a way that is not right. So for example, let me give you an example that's very common. Let's say that I go to the store and I really want a candy bar. Anybody ever go to the store and want a candy bar? Ask one for your parents. Right, very good. Some of the adults at least, right? We all go to the store, we want a candy bar. And let's say you ask your mom and she says, no, you can't have a candy bar. And she has her reasons. Doesn't matter why. Your mom said, no, that's good enough, right? Your mom said no. And then you say, but I really want that candy bar. And you know what might happen? I hope none of you have done this. Maybe you have. We take it and put it in our pocket. Why did we do that? Because I wanted it. And because I wanted it, I thought that I had to do what I needed to do to take it. When in reality, we could have turned to Jesus and said, Jesus, help me with this. I want this candy bar. And my mom said, no, what do I do? And we can do that for everything we do. For example, telling a lie. So often we tell lies because we don't want to get in trouble, or because we want to appear greater than we are, better than we are, or we want to make a situation different than what it is. And instead of saying, Jesus, I'm in this situation that I feel like I have to tell a lie. I feel like I'm being threatened. I feel like things are going to go well for me. Help me, Jesus. Instead of doing that, we take matters into our own hands and we suffer the consequences. And so that's what the virtue of circumspection helps us to avoid. So we look at all the circumstances, the things that surround us. So let's say I want that candy bar and my mom said no. Circumspection will help you to reflect, she must have a good reason. And Jesus takes care of me through my mom, so Jesus is taking care of me. That's a beautiful thing. Or we've done something and we think we have to tell a lie to stay away from trouble, or we want to tell a lie to appear better than we are. We can just say, Jesus, help me to accept things as they are. Help me in this difficult situation. Help me to accept myself as I am, so I don't have to lie about myself. That's the virtue of circumspection, being aware and carefully in our minds, looking at the consequences. Here's a big one in school, right? In school, don't raise your hand. Well, if you want to, you can, but don't raise your hand. Have you ever thought about cheating? Like on a test or homework? Right? Sometimes it's easy to think we've cheated, especially if we didn't study or if we didn't understand the material. We could be tempted to cheat. And circumspection lets you say, if I cheat, I'll be offending God. I will be being disrespectful to my teacher, to my parents, to my fellow classmates. So when you cheat, something like that, we think it harms nobody. It harms everybody. It harms your relationship with God. It harms your relationship with your teacher, with your classmates, even with yourself. And if we put into practice the virtue of circumspection, we say, cheating has lots of consequences. I'm not going to do it. You see how that works? As a circumspection, we look at everything that surrounds us, we look at the consequences, and we make choices based on those things. So isn't it wonderful how God gives us these virtues so that we can know the truth, know Him in the truth, and have confidence in Him. Have confidence that He's going to take care of you. Right? So if the virtue of circumspection is going to take hold in your life, that means that Jesus takes care of you. And that's the most beautiful thing. That allows us to do anything because Jesus is taking care of us. Right? Those 3 young men in the furnace. Is God going to allow us to burn, or is He going to free us? We don't know, but either way, He's going to take care of us. And you know what's interesting? That reading was cut short because it's a longer reading, and it tells us that they were in the furnace, the white hot furnace. The fire was so hot, it was white. And it says when they left the fire, they didn't even smell like smoke. God took that great care of them. And that's what He wants to do with you. And so remember that when you're tempted, when you have choices to make, circumspection. What are the situations and what are the consequences? So thank you so much, boys and girls, and everybody else for paying attention. Go out into the world and put into practice the virtues of prudence today and the virtue of circumspection. God bless you all. So very good. We're back from break, and I know it's tough to go back to school, so congratulations, Principal Ryan and teachers and students for making it back to school, getting things back in order. I know it takes a little bit to get back in. You have to get used to going to bed early again, waking up early again, coming to school again, but you started. And so as we start, I want to always remind us that as the pastor, so I'm the pastor of the parish and of the school, my number one reason for the school, for supporting the school, keeping the school, making our school excel, is that all of you one day become men and women of virtue. And that begins by you today being boys and girls of virtue. And so virtue, as we've known, is the habit of doing good. Does anybody remember that? Virtue is the habit of doing good. Repeat that after me. Virtue is the habit of doing good. One more time. Virtue is the habit of doing good. And so today we're going to speak about the cardinal virtue of justice. Justice means that when we do good, that means we're doing it because we owe God. We owe God the good things that we do. And it's called what we owe God, the due of God. And we also owe one another because we're children of God, because we're Christians. We owe one another goodness as well. And that is, so the cardinal virtue of justice tells us that we owe something to God and we owe something to one another. And so today's virtue is what? Say it if you know it. What is this week? Just say it if you know it. Generosity. Boy, that was quick. Generosity. Very good. So generosity, as we know, I wrote it down so I don't forget it, is the giving of oneself in a willing and cheerful manner for the good of others. Everybody think about that for a second. So generosity is giving of yourself. Right? So you're not giving other people's things. Sometimes it can be generous to give away other people's things, other people's time. But your things, your time, your effort, in a cheerful and a willing manner for the good of others. So what this means, if we're going to be people of generosity, people who are generous, and if you watch the videos, you listen to the talks on virtue, it means that we don't think first of ourselves. You know what? That is tough. If anybody tells you it's tough to think, it's not tough, rather. If anybody ever tells you it's not tough to think of others first and think of yourself first, it's hard. So raise your hand if you ever had the experience, and all of us do this, so think about a time that you thought of yourself first and others second or last. Right? So an example could be if there's a last piece of brownie and you take it. It can be your parents ask you to do something and you don't. It could be one of your friend wants you to wait for them as they put on their boots so you can go to the playground and you don't because you want to get to the swing first. Those are ways that we think first of ourselves. And those are not generous acts. So generous acts are, I think of somebody else first. Right? So we should be in the habit. If there's a last piece of brownie and your brother, your sister's there with you, you can do one of two things, and they're both equal. You can say, you take it. Or you can say, let's split it. All right? That's a great option because you're not thinking of yourself first in that moment. Right? If your parents ask you to do something, and here's a key. Listen to this. This is important. Sometimes we'd rather not do virtuous things. Sometimes we'd rather not share. Sometimes we'd rather not listen. Sometimes we'd rather not obey. But virtue says, no, we do it. Because we're in the habit of doing good. And this is what I owe God. This is what I owe others. Right? So when my friend says, wait for me while I put on my boots to go to the playground, and I know there's only 2 swings, I'm going to risk it because I'm going to wait for my friend. That's being generous. And so generous is thinking of others first. And that's difficult. And then we think of ourselves. But God will always help us to do things that are difficult. So if you find it difficult to be generous, to give of yourself, to give of your time, of your effort, of your things, say, Lord, help me. Help me to be generous. Because you and I are here because of the generosity of others. Raise your hand if you know anyone who gave money for the construction of this church. No hands, right? Because we weren't even alive. Well, some people in the back were. We weren't even alive when this church was built. And yet those people gave money and effort so that you and I today in 2025, it doesn't that sound good, 2025 could have a church in which to worship God. Generosity, they were generous. Raise your hand if you know anybody who contributed money to the building of our school. Raise your hand. None of us do. Because most of us, well, none of you, I don't think even I probably wasn't alive. No, I don't think I was. Well, maybe. None of us were, no, I wasn't. None of us were alive. I just remember the cornerstone. None of us were alive when the school was built. Well, again, some people in the back were, but most of us were not alive at the time. And those people were generous. They gave of themselves for the good of others. And who were the others at the time? You and me. And they didn't even know it. And they were generous. And so a good reason to be generous is because people have been generous to you. Never forget that. A good reason to be generous is because people have been generous to you. And also, I think it's wonderful to think about how people have been generous to our families, to those that we love. You know, my mom, she's getting a little bit older. And just a few weeks ago, she was telling me she went to the grocery store and she was buying a crate of water. Right? Those are heavy. And so some young man in the store, one of the employees, put it in her grocery cart for her. And she said she was going to her car and she thought, oh, how am I going to get that? Because my mom can't lift that anymore because she's gotten a little bit older. And she said a young lady, before my mom even was able to open her car, came to her and grabbed the packet of water and put it in the trunk for her. And the girl said nothing. She just walked away. And my mother said she smiled at her. That was all she did. But what a generous act. She didn't know my mom. She had no idea who she was. She just knew there was an older person here who might need some help. Right? So that girl put herself second. And in this case, this older woman, she put her first. And that's the challenge of generosity. So look today and every day for ways to be generous. And generosity begins by putting yourself second, sometimes third or fourth or fifth, and putting others first. The biggest, I think, way to be generous, and this is a challenge to all of you, is to one day offer your life to Jesus. And there's several ways to do this. One of them is you offer your life to Jesus in marriage. In good, faithful, holy marriage. And one thing that I want you to do as graduates of our school, and don't even be thinking about getting married right now, right? That's the farthest thing from our mind. But every kid who's gone to Catholic school does not move in with their partner until they're married. There is no partner, right? You don't move in until you're married. Did you know that's the norm? That is the normal, the thing that God put before us. And yet it's so rare. That's being generous to God. That's giving yourself generously to Him. Maybe God is calling some of you to be priests, some of you boys. Maybe He's calling some of you girls to be nuns, some of you boys to be religious brothers. Being generous and saying, Lord, I give myself to you, here I am. That's the biggest generosity, is giving ourselves to God in marriage, in religious life, in the priesthood. So what a beautiful thing, the virtue of generosity. We think of ourselves second and place others first. Why? Because we love God. We want to love God, and we know that God loves us. So very good, everybody. Thank you for paying attention. Have a beautiful day. Once again, Merry Christmas, everybody. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year, everybody. Happy Feast of the Epiphany, everybody. Thank you. Have a beautiful rest of your day. And welcome back to school.